Those words rang out like a razor-sharp blade, cutting through the candlelit room filled with the aroma of wine. I sat frozen, still holding the silver fork, the prime steak on my plate untouched. In that moment, the eyes of nearly 30 members of the Mitchell family turned toward me. Some lowered their heads, others stared intently, and the soft piano music in the background was swallowed by a thick, suffocating silence. I am Clara Evans, 32 years old, wife of Daniel Mitchell, the youngest son of this prominent Boston family. I once thought I was lucky to marry into a family steeped in tradition, prestige, and power. But ever since I became their daughter-in-law, I realized the only thing my father-in-law, Howard Mitchell, ever gave me was contempt. Tonight, at his lavish 65th birthday celebration, in front of his wife, children, grandchildren, and extended family, he didn't hesitate to humiliate me like that. The grandeur of the party was enough to overwhelm any outsider. The Mitchells' historic mansion, a restored Gothic masterpiece, glowed with chandeliers, crimson velvet drapes, and a long table draped in pristine white linen, adorned with crystal glasses, silver candlesticks, and gleaming cutlery. Imported roses were meticulously arranged along the table, their faint fragrance mingling with the scent of roasted meat and aged Bordeaux wine. Everything was perfect until Howard spoke. Daniel, my husband, sat beside me, his face pale, eyes wide in disbelief that his father could say such a thing. His hand instinctively tightened around mine under the table, a silent apology. He's a kind, gentle man, always trying to mediate the tension between his father and me, but he's also trapped by his unwavering respect for his father. My mother-in-law, Margaret, sat not far away, her face flushed with embarrassment. A quiet woman who'd spent her life in Howard's shadow, she now lowered her head, unable to intervene. Her lips trembled, her hand shaking as it rested on her wine glass, too heavy to lift. The rest of the family, siblings, grandchildren, stared at me as if watching the climax of a play. No one dared to intervene. For a fleeting moment, my heart raced. Those words weren't just a slap. They were a trampling of my dignity. I'd heard Howard's veiled insults before, but never so openly. To him, I'd always be an outsider, a woman from an ordinary background, unworthy of stepping foot in this house. But instead of reacting impulsively, I took a deep breath. I wouldn't let myself cry in front of him. I set my fork down, neatly folded my napkin, and placed it beside my plate. Calmly, unhurriedly, I stood up in the deafening silence of the room. "Excuse me, I need some air," I said softly, my voice steady, my gaze fixed calmly on Howard. No one stopped me. No one said a word. The sound of my high heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the mansion, as if the entire house trembled with each step. Outside, the October night in Boston was frigid, the wind from the Charles River making me shiver. But inside my chest, a strange strength burned. I knew from that moment everything would change. I'd endured, thinking that if I stayed quiet, time would make Howard see me differently. I was wrong. Some people, given the chance, mistake silence for weakness. What Howard didn't know was that for the past 2 years, his so-called Mitchell development empire, which he took such pride in, had been surviving on the silent capital from my investment firm, Eden Capital. He could call me trash, but that trash held the key to his survival. Back at my downtown apartment, I sat by the window, looking out at the glowing streets below. Howard's words still echoed in my mind, but they were mixed with an odd sense of calm. My patience had ended at that birthday dinner. When I picked up my phone and scrolled to my lawyer at Eden Capital, my heart didn't waver. It was steadier than ever. It was time for Howard to learn a costly lesson about respect. I'm not sharing this to complain or seek pity. I'm sharing because I believe everyone, at some point, has been looked down upon, undervalued, or dismissed. In those moments, we face a choice: stay silent and endure, or stand up and assert ourselves. If you've ever felt that way, had your efforts belittled or your dignity trampled, please comment below so we can share our stories. Have you ever walked out of a room full of family, yet felt so alone it was as if the whole world had turned its back on you? That's exactly how I felt after that birthday dinner. Boston sparkled outside, but all I saw was a suffocating darkness enveloping me. Back at my modern downtown apartment, a glass-walled tower reflecting neon lights from bars and shops, I felt a chill. This place had always been my sanctuary, a refuge from my in-laws' judgment and whispers. Tonight, it felt colder than ever. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and sank into the sofa, clutching my head. Howard's voice echoed, "She's just trash." It looped in my mind, growing louder the more I tried to push it away. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through my contacts. A familiar name appeared. Patricia Coleman, my lawyer at Eden Capital. After a brief hesitation, I pressed call. "Clara?" Her warm, resolute voice answered. "I want to pull all funding from the Harbor Heights project," I said, each word cutting through the air like a blade. A pause on the other end. "Are you sure? That's a major project, over $2 million with auxiliary contracts tied to it." "I'm sure," I interrupted, my voice no longer shaking. "I want the withdrawal documents sent out tomorrow morning by 10 a.m. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, my mind a storm of emotions but also filled with a strange new feeling, liberation. In that moment, I reflected on the journey that brought me here. After graduating from Wharton with a degree in finance, I turned down offers from Wall Street giants to carve my own path. I founded Eden Capital in a tiny rented office in Cambridge. It was just me and a young assistant at first. We sought out struggling real estate projects, abandoned developments, debt-ridden commercial spaces, and turned them into opportunities. With each successful deal, Eden Capital grew, managing a portfolio worth tens of millions. I knew I'd earned a place among Boston's top investors, though I chose to keep a low profile. That discretion was why Mitchell Development, my father-in-law's company, still existed. 2 years ago, it was on the brink of bankruptcy, drowning in debt. No one would touch it. I saw potential in their projects and decided to invest, but I kept my identity hidden through Eden Capital. The cruel irony: Howard called me trash, yet I was the sole reason he still stood in the business world. Daniel, my husband, had no idea. To him, I was just an ordinary financial analyst with a 9-to-5 job, occasionally working late. I never told him about Eden Capital, not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted him to love me for who I was, not for the wealth I controlled. But now those secrets were about to unravel, not gently, but like a raging storm. I opened my laptop, the screen's pale glow illuminating my tired face. Before me were detailed reports. Withdrawing funds from Harbor Heights would cripple Mitchell Development's liquidity. Banks would call in loans, contractors would pull out. The empire Howard boasted about would crumble like a sandcastle swept away by the tide. My hands clenched, my heart torn between rage and pain. This wasn't just about money. It was about the years of being belittled, humiliated, and dismissed. Was I being too ruthless? I wondered. Then I recalled that moment at the dinner, Howard's contemptuous glare, the awkward murmurs of relatives, and Daniel's helpless silence. It wasn't just a personal insult, it was a denial of my dignity. A line had been crossed, there was no going back. The plan crystallized in my mind. At 10 a.m., 3 messages would be sent simultaneously. 1. Howard's lawyer would receive notice of Eden Capital's withdrawal, with terms ending all partnerships. 2. Daniel, my husband, would get a text revealing the truth. His ordinary wife was the anonymous investor his father had praised. 3. Howard, the man who publicly humiliated me, would receive a short message from me. Never underestimate what you deem worthless. 3 messages, enough to shift the entire game. The Boston night was quiet, but a storm was brewing inside me. I stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the bustling streets below. The cold wind stung my face, but it couldn't extinguish the fire in my chest. I knew I was about to start an unrelenting battle. I'd been patient, tried to keep the peace, believed that loving Daniel and living kindly would eventually change Howard's view. I was wrong. My patience didn't earn his respect. It only made him think I was weak, easily trampled. Now he was about to learn the biggest mistake of his life. I returned to my desk, signing the electronic documents my lawyer had sent. My cursor hovered over the send button. For a split second, I thought of Daniel's face, his loving gaze on peaceful days. How shocked would he be when he learned the truth? But I couldn't turn back. I clicked. The documents left my inbox like an arrow shot with no recall. In that moment, I knew. The game had begun. I, the one called Trash, held the fate of the Mitchell family in my hands. By 10 a.m. tomorrow, they would know the truth. If you find this story compelling and want to follow what happens next, comment why. If you think I was wrong to make this decision, comment N. Your thoughts will let me know I'm not alone in these emotions. 10 a.m. The second hand on the silver clock in my office hit the mark. At that moment, across Boston, 3 messages were sent, 3 arrows I'd prepared all night. In the quiet of that moment, I sat at my desk, cradling a coffee mug, staring at the cold blue glow of my computer screen. The office was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. I knew, in minutes, everything would change. At Mitchell Development's headquarters, Howard Mitchell, my father-in-law, was likely reading my message. Never underestimate what you deem worthless. I could picture his face paling, his hands trembling as he realized the anonymous investor who'd poured millions into his projects was the trash daughter-in-law he'd humiliated before the family. Almost simultaneously, his lawyer received Eden Capital's withdrawal notice. The contract was terminated, all funding was cut, and Daniel, my husband, was holding his phone, reading a text revealing the truth. His wife wasn't just a financial analyst, but the founder of Eden Capital, the one who'd saved his father's empire for 2 years. Within 10 minutes, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Clara? His voice was frantic. I just got your message, saying you're the anonymous investor for Dad's company. Is this a joke? It can't be. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. It's not a joke, Daniel. I'm the one who funded his company. Silence stretched on the other end. I could hear his rapid breathing, mixed with the background noise of his office. My God, Clara, so all this time, everything Dad bragged about, it was your money? Not just money, I replied, my voice calm, but my heart in turmoil. The permits, the partners, the contractors, all through Eden Capital. Why do you think his project suddenly sailed smoothly after nearly going bankrupt? Daniel was quiet for a long time, then said, Why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret like this? I heard the pain in his voice, the sense of betrayal. I knew trust in our marriage meant everything to him, but I also knew how torn he'd have been if I'd told him sooner. Daniel, I said softly, I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have. I didn't want our love tainted by money or power. But yesterday, when your father humiliated me in front of everyone, that line was crossed. His voice broke. I don't know who to believe anymore. You hid this from me. And Dad, he's been looking down on you all this time. I closed my eyes, letting tears fall. I don't want you to choose sides, but Daniel, it's time you see the truth. Meanwhile, across town, Howard was losing it. He was frantically calling banks, contractors, and partners who once flattered him, but they all turned him away. Accounts were frozen. The Harbor Heights project, his pride, was officially revoked. In less than 2 hours, he lost not just funding, but the confidence of Boston's financial world. Emails flooded in, contractors canceling, banks demanding repayment, partners seeking explanations. The once bustling Mitchell development office turned into a chaotic battlefield. Howard, who once sat smugly behind his massive walnut desk, was now scrambling like a cornered animal. Boston's financial world was shaken. A titan who'd once stood tall was brought low in just 24 hours. Internal reports leaked. News spread on investment forums. Mitchell Development loses funding, faces bankruptcy. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues and friends in the industry, stunned and curious. Clara, are you really that anonymous investor? I didn't respond. I sat quietly in my office, watching news alerts flash like sparks spreading into a wildfire. By noon, Daniel came to me. He stood at the door of Eden Capital's office, his eyes red. I need to hear it from you in person, he said. I want to believe you, but my heart's a mess. I stood, stepping closer, looking into his eyes. Daniel, you know I love you. But I couldn't keep letting your father trample me. I saved his company multiple times, and in return, he called me trash. Do you think I should have stayed silent forever? He lowered his head, hands clenched. I get it, but it hurts. Dad was everything I believed in. Now this truth? It's like a knife. I know, I whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. But sometimes, a knife like that wakes us up. You can choose who to stand with. I just hope you choose the truth. Across town, Howard was raging in his office, slamming his desk, calling old connections for help. But they all stayed silent or politely declined. No one wanted to board a sinking ship. He called me 3 times. I stared at his name on my screen, then firmly pressed decline. In that moment, I realized true power isn't in a loud voice or an imposing desk. It's in respect. And that's something Howard never gave me. As the sun sank behind Boston's skyscrapers, I sat alone in my office, conflicted. Part of me felt satisfied that the truth was out, but another part felt a deep sadness. After all, Howard was my father-in-law, the father of the man I love. My phone rang again. This time, Daniel. His voice trembled. "Clara, you need to know. Dad just collapsed in his office. They're taking him to the hospital." I froze, my hands cold. In just 24 hours, from a lavish birthday party to a catastrophic collapse, and now an unexpected stroke. The power game I thought was over had only just begun. If you want to hear more stories and dilemmas like the ones I'm facing and relate to them, check out my previous videos on this channel. Have you ever seen someone at the peak of power become as fragile as a dry leaf in the wind overnight? I witnessed it with my own eyes, and the feeling was both strange and haunting. Daniel's message left me stunned. Dad just collapsed in his office. They're taking him to Boston General. I rushed to the hospital. Boston was still crowded, cars honking, skyscrapers glowing. The city hadn't changed, but my world had taken a sharp turn. At Boston General's ER, I found Daniel hunched in a plastic chair, eyes red. His suit from the morning was crumpled, his tie loose. When he saw me, he stood abruptly. "Clara," his voice was hoarse. "The doctors say Dad had a minor stroke, temporary paralysis on one side, but there's a high chance it could happen again." I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling him tremble with fear. I'd never seen Daniel so vulnerable. Later, we were allowed to visit. Howard lay on a stark white hospital bed, tubes in his arm, his face pale. The man who'd roared in his office, who'd boasted at his party, was now just a frail, elderly figure, eyes half open, mumbling incoherently. Margaret, my mother-in-law, sat at his bedside. She wept silently, her thin hand clutching his. I'd never seen her like this. The woman who'd always been reserved, composed, was now a trembling shadow, her eyes filled with panic. "Clara!" She turned to me, eyes swollen. "Maybe I was wrong to stay silent all these years. Howard, he—" She choked, unable to continue. I sat beside her, silent. The news spread quickly. Within hours, local papers blared headlines. "Boston real estate tycoon collapses amid crisis." The words carved into Howard's once proud legacy, the media dug into every detail: a failing company, a fractured family, and now a health crisis. From a symbol of success, he became a cautionary tale. As if by cruel fate, friends and partners turned their backs. Those who once toasted him now stayed silent, claiming to be busy. His phone no longer rang with offers, only calls from banks, creditors, and curious reporters. Daniel stayed at the hospital, working on documents from the hallway. I saw exhaustion etched into his face, but also his unwavering love for his father. Despite the betrayal, he couldn't let go. At times, he looked at me, torn. "Clara, I'm angry at you, but I'm also grateful. Without you, the company would have collapsed long ago. But you're also the one who pulled the final safety net, making Dad fall." I stayed quiet. I understood his conflict, and deep down, I was wrestling with my own. Part of me felt justice had been served, but another part ached seeing a man, however arrogant, now so helpless. Margaret deteriorated quickly. She'd always relied on Howard, and seeing him immobile sent her into a panic. One night, I had to take her home, but at the door she cried, begging to return to the hospital. "I'm afraid if I'm not there, Howard will leave me." I helped her sit, holding her like a mother needing comfort. In that moment I realized, sometimes cruelty doesn't just break the proud, it weighs on the innocent too. Howard woke after days in a semi-coma. He tried to speak but could only manage distorted sounds. His eyes, once blazing with arrogance, now looked at me with confusion and vulnerability. For the first time, I saw no contempt in his gaze, only fear. Loneliness enveloped him. No friends, no allies, not even his reputation remained. Only his family, whom he'd once dismissed, stood by him. Daniel held his father's hand, whispering, "Dad, I'm here, I won't leave you." Margaret occasionally broke down sobbing at his bedside, and I stood silently, watching the man who'd once made me choke with anger now reduced to a pitiful, frail figure. The media kept circling. They even snapped photos of me entering the hospital. Sensational headlines appeared. Mysterious daughter-in-law and the fall of the Mitchell Empire. Reading those words, my heart sank. I didn't want praise or attention. I just wanted respect. But everything had spiraled beyond my control. That night, sitting alone in the hospital hallway, I wondered, had I gone too far? Could I stop, extend a hand to save some part of Howard? Or should I let him face the full consequences of his arrogance? I recalled his words at the party. "She's just trash." He was wrong. But if I stayed unrelenting, I might become someone without a heart. In the darkness, the steady beep of Howard's heart monitor echoed. I closed my eyes, telling myself, maybe it's time for a different decision, one he'd never expect. What would you do if someone who insulted you, called you trash, now lay helpless in a hospital bed, facing the loss of everything? Would you pursue revenge to the end, or offer a hand when they have nothing left? That question haunted me during the days Howard spent at Boston General. I visited him one rainy afternoon. The hospital hallway was quiet, save for the click of nurses' shoes and the sharp smell of antiseptic. Inside his room, Howard lay tilted to one side, staring blankly out the window. Half his body was nearly immobile, his left arm trembling as he tried to lift a plastic cup. Daniel sat by the bed tending to his father while juggling bank documents. His eyes were weary, but when he saw me, he stood. "Clara, you're here." You're... Margaret was there too, curled up in a corner, eyes red from crying. The room felt heavy. I set my umbrella down and approached. Howard glanced at me, his eyes briefly meeting mine, as if he wanted to say something but swallowed it. No more haughty tone, no more disdain, just silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, my voice calm. "You don't need to worry. I'm not here to humiliate you." Howard blinked, his lips twitching, perhaps trying to speak but unable to. Daniel cut in quickly. "The bank's preparing to seize the house. They say they'll auction it if we can't come up with the money." His voice cracked. Margaret sobbed. "That house. It's where I've lived for over 40 years, where the kids grew up. I can't imagine." I looked at her, then at Daniel. A strange feeling stirred in me. Amidst all the bitterness, there was still something vital. A home. The next day, I met my lawyer, Patricia, at Eden Capital's office. When I shared my plan, she was stunned. "Clara, are you sure? You were within your rights to pull the funding. Helping them keep the house now will put pressure on you. Why do it?" I paused, then answered, "Because this isn't about being a dutiful daughter-in-law. It's about one human to another. I don't want to see them, especially Daniel and Margaret, out on the street. I want Howard to understand. Compassion can be stronger than revenge." She nodded and began drafting terms to negotiate with the bank. I knew, with Eden Capital's reputation and connections, keeping the house was feasible. 2 days later, we met the bank's representative. I wore a light gray suit, walking into the meeting room with calm confidence. In contrast, Daniel and Margaret sat side by side, hands clasped, faces anxious. The bank representative began. "Per policy, we can seize and auction the property to recover the debt. However, if a third party steps in to guarantee," I cut in, "Eden Capital will guarantee the minimum, on one condition: the house at 117 Beacon Hill will not be auctioned. The Mitchell family retains the right to stay there." The room fell silent. Daniel stared at me, eyes wide with shock. Margaret burst into tears, unable to believe her ears. After the meeting, Daniel pulled me into the hallway, his voice breaking. "Clara, why did you do this? After everything Dad said, everything he did to you." I looked into his eyes. "Because I don't want to become cold-blooded. I want your father to see that respect isn't bought with money or power. It's earned by treating others as human. I didn't save his company, but I saved the house. So he has a chance to reflect on what truly matters." Daniel stood still. then hugged me tightly, as if releasing all his burdens. I don't know what to say except thank you. I'm proud of you. That evening, when I returned to the hospital with the news, Margaret sobbed. Clara, you're the savior of this family. I was too silent all these years, letting Howard treat you poorly. Today I see my own cowardice. I took her hand gently. No, Mom. Sometimes silence is the only way to survive. What matters is we've taken a new step today. Howard lay in bed, his eyes welling up. He struggled to move his good hand, trembling as he gestured. I stepped closer, taking his hand. In his eyes, for the first time, I saw a humbling, a silent apology. No more contempt, just vulnerability and gratitude. In that moment, I felt something clear. True victory doesn't come from making others kneel in pain, but from being strong enough to forgive. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward, not letting hatred imprison you. But I knew this wasn't the end. Saving the house was just the beginning. With the Mitchell empire gone, Howard's reputation lost, and Boston buzzing about the mysterious daughter-in-law who turned the tables, questions lingered. Would Howard truly change, or would he claw back for scraps of lost power? I looked out the hospital window, Boston's gray sky blanketing the old buildings. A premonition stirred. The biggest challenge wasn't over, it was just beginning. Do you believe a person's life can change so much in 6 months that they become unrecognizable? I do, because I've seen it with my own heart. From fiery arrogance to frail silence and finally an apology I waited years to hear. 6 months have passed since that fateful night at Boston General. Mitchell Development officially declared bankruptcy, its commercial assets liquidated. The news hit like a shockwave. Mitchell Empire collapses entirely. The name once synonymous with Boston's real estate power was now just a footnote in legal documents. Howard, who once called himself a tycoon, lost all his prestige. But thanks to the deal I negotiated, the Beacon Hill house was saved, the last refuge for him and Margaret. There, he recovered quietly, a wheelchair replacing the proud strides he once took into boardrooms. Meanwhile, Eden Capital entered a new chapter. I decided not to focus solely on high-profit projects, but to allocate significant funds to support small businesses, community funds, and young entrepreneurs. Each signed contract reminded me of Howard's fall. It taught me that money is just a tool. How you use it reflects your true value. The press, once obsessed with the Mitchell family scandal, now wrote about me differently. Female CEO turns crisis into community opportunity. Clara Evans, the new face of sustainable investment in Boston. Honestly, I never craved the spotlight, but I knew sometimes public attention could turn a personal story into a broader reminder for society. For Daniel, the past 6 months were a journey of healing. He'd been torn between love for me and loyalty to his father. But in the end, he understood. True love is built on respect and honesty. One evening, as we walked along the Charles River, he held my hand, his voice low. I lost faith in Dad, but I found it again in my wife. That's worth more than any empire. I looked at him, the golden streetlights reflecting on the water, my heart swelling. I knew we'd weathered the storm, and our love was stronger than ever. Then came the day I never expected. The Mitchell family held a small reunion at the Beacon Hill house, the first since Howard's collapse. I stepped into the grand living room where old paintings still hung on the walls, but the aura of power was gone. Instead, there was a quiet, nervous atmosphere. Howard sat in his wheelchair, aged and weary, but his eyes sharper than I'd expected. As everyone settled, he turned his chair toward me. The room fell silent, only the ticking of a pendulum clock breaking the stillness. Clara, his voice trembled, heavy. I owe you an apology. I froze. The room seemed to stop. Margaret sobbed. Daniel gripped my hand under the table. Howard took a labored breath and continued. I was wrong. Wrong to look down on you. Wrong to humiliate you in front of the family. I lost everything because of my arrogance. But you were the one who reached out to save this house for us. Without you, I'd have nothing. He lowered his head, shoulders shaking. For the first time, I saw not the real estate tycoon, but a man capable of regret. In that moment, all eyes were on me. I could have stayed silent or responded with disdain. Instead, I offered a faint smile. I don't need you to call me anything or restore my honor. I just hope from now on you understand that respecting others is the only way to preserve your own worth. Howard looked at me, tears in his eyes. His slow nod was his answer. The news of his public apology spread quickly. Boston's business world saw it as a cautionary tale. They talked about Mitchell Development's collapse, but more importantly, the lesson. Never underestimate anyone, because the person you scorn today might hold your fate tomorrow. An old colleague told me, Clara, your story changed how we view relationships in business. Respect isn't just courtesy, it's an asset. That night, back at my apartment, I sat by the window, gazing at Boston's twinkling skyline. I reflected on it all. The venomous birthday dinner, the tears in the hospital, the reunion with an unexpected apology. I realized the greatest strength isn't in relentless revenge, but in holding on to dignity and compassion. Compassion didn't diminish me, it gave me peace. I wondered, if Howard ever rises from his wheelchair, will he revert to his old ways? Or has this fall truly changed him forever? I don't know, but one thing I'm certain of. I'll never lose myself in a storm of power and pride again. And perhaps my journey isn't over. Out there, countless stories of family, honor, love, and respect wait for me to explore and share with you. Looking back, I've learned something simple yet profound. True strength lies not in wealth or fame, but in how we treat one another. A single word of respect can save a relationship, while an insult can destroy a family, even an empire. I've endured enough bitterness and conflict to know that revenge brings fleeting satisfaction, but compassion grants lasting peace. It was compassion that set me free and became a mirror for those around me to awaken. I share this not to boast or seek sympathy, but to remind us, never underestimate anyone, because sometimes the person you dismiss holds the key to your survival. If you relate to what I've been through, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow my channel to explore more dramatic yet deeply human family stories with me.